And well, we knew that by far more people will really show up than the availability of seats. But sorry, we tried to change the room and to have another room, but it wasn't possible. So actually, that's why we have to come along with the situation as it is right now. That's for the beginning. Well, I'm myself a member of the European Parliament, re-elected right now. I come from Germany. My name is Gesine Meissner. And well, we invited you today from the European Liberal Forum in order to present you a study. We have had election, and of course, the structure of the parliament is a different one than it had been before. And since the crisis arose in Europe, in the world, and in general, we had really a tendency to have more nationalistic thinking in some member states instead of what we liberals think is the right way to go forward with European thinking and European uniting and so on. And that's why we thought it's good to have this study and to discuss afterwards what is the new European Parliament like? What does it mean for the policy in Europe in general? What does it mean for us liberals in our political standpoints? That's why I'm very happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. And now I give the floor immediately to our President of the European Liberal Forum. Please.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, participants of this event, I'm really so happy that so many of you showed up. I would like to welcome you all to this discussion, and especially I would like to extend my thank you to Gesine Meissner that she's hosting this event in the European Parliament. Just to say a few words of the European Liberal Forum. We are a political foundation at the European level, affiliated to the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, of the ALDE party. And presently we have almost 40 member organizations in most of the states of the European Union, which are political foundations, research institutes, and of course think tanks. And one of our main goals or missions, as also for other political foundations at the European level, is to contribute to the building of the European public space and to the European public policies. So I'm very glad that in a short time after the EP elections, we are able to present here a study which we have supported as a junior partner of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and also that we have succeeded to get such an distinguished panel to discuss these issues, and one of the members also from our member organizations. Now recently we have seen in Europe, at least from 1980s, the emergence of populist movements and also the electoral success of extremist parties in the EU, and of course the loss of votes of the major, or some would say historical, European parties. But at the same time, there is also a rather low turnout at European elections as also at other levels, and of course the abstention is increasing. But can perhaps only economic and social crisis give an answer to this development? I don't think so, maybe partially. And also, probably the rise of populism cannot be only explained by the identity politics, which sees the EU integrationist enterprise as perhaps lacking a soul and threatening a nation. And of course, one of the solutions how we could tackle these problems, and I think we have to admit that there are certain shortcomings in the democracy of the European Union, and that also some major parties do adhere to some populist rhetoric and communication. And perhaps this study will give some answers and some proposals specifically to the communication. So I would give now the floor to our moderator, Csaba Tóth, from ELF member organization Republika from Hungary. And I hope you will enjoy this debate and participate in it.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for these kind introductory words. I am indeed Csavatos from Hungary, which is probably the reason I'm here to moderate the debate about the unstoppable far right. The format of this roundtable discussion will be as follows. First, we will have the presentation of the study from Timo Locsoki, who is of course the author of The Unstoppable Far Right, Populism and the Aftermath of the European Elections and a fellow at German Marshall Fund of the United States. And then we will have a roundtable discussion. I will introduce our panelists after the presentation of the study, which, by the way, can be distributed for those of you who do not have, because we do have some copies of it. So, Timo, the floor is yours for your presentation of 15 to 20 minutes.
Well, thanks a lot for the kind invite. My name is Timo. I conducted and wrote the study. The study can be found. It's lying over there. I'm not sure if you want to distribute it now or if you want to wait for this. It lies on top of the suitcase. So in case you want to distribute it now, be so kind and pass it around. In my presentation, I will of course only highlight the most important findings. And I want to encourage you, before you take this, what's the outcome of the study, for granted, or you want to use it for your work, I strongly encourage you to read the parts of the methods and how we reached these results before you accept it without thinking about it. As said, I'm coming from the German Marshall Fund, Berlin, from the Europe program, and we are an independent think tank keen on figuring out drafting policy advices for European policymakers and showing them which options they face. One of the prime issues we've just been told about is, of course, the rise of right populist movements, right populist parties in Europe over the last decade. Interestingly enough, the common perception has been that these parties are on the rise in all countries at all times and should be conceived as an axiomatic given, meaning that basically the voters like the program, other parties fail to cater to voters' interests. That's why right populist parties rise everywhere. The second axiom we can find in the public debate is that especially the heated debates over European affairs in the last 5 years ought to be understood as a huge benefiter for these parties. Since when people talk about Europe, they like parties who say, well, you know, the entire European concept is not working, let's rather come back to the nation as such. And then what we've seen in the last years is that some parties rose, but some parties fell at the right populist front. And this, of course, runs counter to understand the rise of these parties as an axiomatic given. So, the question of the study has been, how the hell can we account for this? Why are these parties rising in certain countries? Why are they not gathering voter support? Why are they even losing voter support in other countries? Which is the prime research puzzle. Or in more scientific terms, excuse me if I may use that sentence once, how can we account for variation with right populist parties' support by the voters? And then the study argues the following. We know from very previous other studies, which can fill libraries, that the prime question, the prime indicator in order to account for the rise and fall of smaller parties is how other parties communicate pivotal issues to the public. This is extremely important to emphasize throughout the study. It's not about what other parties actually do. It's about what voters think what other parties did. That's why the crucial focus we have had is we scrutinized how media reports about other parties' behavior and how this might affect right populist parties' advances. Given that right populist parties, of course, focus on migration in the European Union, we scrutinized the European Union as the prime topic of interest and had a look how established parties talk about affairs of the European Union in the last 5 years, and whether this might have had an effect on the advance of right populist parties. This is the design of the study. I will only highlight some very important findings very briefly, but as said, I strongly encourage you, if you want to make use of the results, read carefully how these results were reached, because this is very important to be understood in order to know what came out of the study. We scrutinized 4 countries, Netherlands, Germany, United Kingdom, and Sweden, and checked how the parties in these 4 countries talk about the European Union. right populist parties are on the rise in all of these countries, but in one, in the Netherlands. There these parties actually fell. They lost 4% in the European election, and they also lose support in all national elections since 2010. So Geert Wilders, in fact, is losing support since 2010. Very important to keep in mind. The data selection is, as I said, I will not talk about this in detail, is a scrutinization of how the most important conservative newspapers in these countries report about what the parties say about the European Union. This is extremely important. It's not about what these parties do. It's about what the newspapers report what they do. And this is the pivotal joint. As the readers, the voters, read newspapers. They don't ask for 200 pages law summaries, they read the newspapers. And the results of the study are very striking. There is one prime finding. It's number one. The first finding is, if we control for socioeconomic factors, for migration figures, for unemployment rate, for concerns over unemployment and migration, we still find that in all these 4 countries, the prime reason why these right populist parties rise or fall is the conduct of the mid-right parties. It's extremely important to bear in mind. There's an array of factors impinging on advance of right populist parties, but even if we construct a statistical model which takes into account all these factors, we still can distill one prime factor, which basically, again, the scientific terms, is the necessary condition. Necessary condition means if this thing is not there, all the rest doesn't matter either. And the necessary condition that explains why right populist parties rise or fall is how mid-right parties communicate Europe. This is the prime message I encourage you to take away from this study. And then point 2 and 3 of the findings is, so how does the conduct of the mid-right parties affect the advances of right populist parties? Here, very important, even though Sweden was in the sample, we couldn't obtain enough data points on the Swedish debate on Europe, which already is a very striking finding, since there hardly is a debate on Europe in Sweden, so we couldn't find data on that. Oh, one step back, sorry. What we though find is that in Germany and in the United Kingdom, where the UKIP party is on the rise, and the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, which at least ought to be understood as a functional equivalent to right populist parties, is rising within 3-4 years, we can observe the similar conduct of the mid-right parties. Namely, the national newspapers of record, the Daily Telegraph in the British case, and the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, reported a very Eurosceptical profile of the British Tories and of the German CDU-CSU in 2010. And then they reported that in the years to come, both established conservative parties moved to a more pro-European position. And exactly at this point in time, UKIP and AfD rose in electoral support. This is extremely important to bear in mind. These parties are totally dependent on the conduct of the mid-right parties. This is extremely important. They cannot set the agenda themselves. To an extent they can, but as said, if the mid-right parties don't act in a way benefiting for the right populist parties, they cannot increase their voter share. I'll show you in a second. When we scrutinize the Dutch case, we see that at the same time as the Dutch PVV, Geert Wilders party, is losing in voter support, the most important mid-right party in the Netherlands introduced a Eurosceptical profile, but has stuck with this profile for 4 or 5 years. While the Dutch voters find a Eurosceptical profile with a moderate party, they do not see the need for voting for a right populist actor. This might sound rather abstract, that's why I now want to talk about the graphs. Here, you see the development in the United Kingdom. If you were to explain the graph, the blue bars is the electoral report of UKIP. Very important. It is on the polling on the national level, and it's not the real polling, but how this polling changed to 2009. Because 2009 is considered the baseline, this is when the study started. Meaning that when you see in the first semester 2014, you see UKIP is polling not at 9%, but at national polls at approximately 12%. But the difference between 12 and 9 is 3% UKIP was polling at 2009. That's why the blue bar hereby shows UKIP increased 9% in 2014 in comparison to 2009. This is basically the blue bars. The red bar is the position change of the British Tories. The more the red line moves upward, the more pro-European the British Tories were reported in the Daily Telegraph. This does not mean that given the remarkable move of the Tory party, that the Tories were a pro-European force in 2014. It meant they were far more pro-European than they've been in 2010 or 2011. What's nicely to be seen at this slide is that exactly at that point in time, in the first semester 2013, where the Tories had the greatest jump from a Eurosceptical to a rather pro-European position, exactly at that point in time did the British voters turn to UKIP. Not before that. UKIP was around for 5 to 10 years before, and they couldn't gather this electoral support before they were dependent on the Tories to offer them an electoral niche. Very important to bear in mind. The next slide shows the German case, and there you see a similar picture. The German CDU-CSU, again, is the red line moved to a more pro-European position. Again, this does not mean that CDU-CSU in 2009 was against the European Union. It only indicates that the position in 2013 was far more pro-European than it was in 2010. And then you might say, well, you know, the positional shift of the CDU-CSU happened apparently in 2011. Why the hell did it take 2 years until the voters turned to the AfD? And the reply is very simple. Because the party did not exist before that. As the CDU-CSU changed position in 2011, the German voters did not know of any democratic party which would embrace a Eurosceptical profile. The only party on the right of the CDU-CSU that was known to the voters are neo-Nazi parties. And these parties usually don't get elected by democratically oriented voters. But end of 2013 was the very first time the AfD stood for election in Germany. And then, of course, the move of the CDU-CSU played out and the voters turned to the AfD. And now the final slide for the Dutch case looks a little more complicated, but it's very, very simple again. What you see with the blue bars is that, in fact, in stark contrast to UKIP and AfD in Germany, the PVV cannot increase in voter support. In fact, it's falling in voter support. It lost in the European election, 4%. And it lost even more remarkably in all national elections in the Netherlands. In 2010, 2012, and national polls, Geert Wilders has huge problems mobilizing its voter base. And what you see here is that the red line indicating the position of the VVD points down. Pointing down means that the VVD is sticking to its Eurosceptical profile. So unlike the Tories, or unlike the CDU-CSU, the Dutch VVD is true, sticks true to its Eurosceptical profile. And exactly in these periods where the VVD sticks with its Eurosceptical profile, the Dutch right populists cannot gather voter support. And the interpretation would read, well, if the voters are after a skeptical program, skeptical towards the current state of European affairs, and they can find this with the moderate party, which is even governing the Netherlands, why would they opt for another political player? The program they're after, they already have. And now, I'm reaching the closing remarks of my study. Namely, what does that mean? if these are the political processes we apparently seem to find based on the data we scrutinized, that the prime explanans for variation with advances of right populist parties is not economics, it's not what right populists themselves do, it is not what social democrats or liberals do, it is not what the conservatives do, it is what the newspapers report what the conservatives do. What does that mean for policymakers in the European context? Policymakers in Europe are caught in a limbo. On the one hand, there are various push and pull factors who urge them to support further European integration, be it on fiscal and monetary affairs, security policies, and so forth. So there's various incentives for conservatives, liberals, social democrats, the Greens alike, to go out to the public and tell them, hey listen, European integration is the way we should go. There is a bunch of benefits in this, let's just do this. On the other hand, they know, if they continue to pursue this strategy, they will benefit the right populist parties, which of course compete for the very same voter base, for the conservative voters, which are, rightfully so to my reading, concerned about the current state of European affairs. So the trade-off, European integration or winning the elections. Very bluntly put. Are you in favor of Europe or do you want to stay in office? So here are the options policymakers have. The first option is, okay then, we continue to pursue a clear-cut pro-European agenda. And this will be a Pyrrhic victory for European policymakers. This might enable substantial steps towards further European integration, but they will breed a right populist contender which will easily attract up to 1/4, even 1/5, 1/4, 1/5 of the voters, as you see in France, in England, Switzerland, Austria. So even though you might propel the European project in the short run, you know for sure that you create someone, a strong political competitor, which will take this one back whenever they seize office. And, as we see from the Dutch case and the French case, the stronger a right populist party gets, the more inclined all other political actors to take over their program. Because they know, hey listen, Europe, migration might be as good as it might sound, but I want to win the election. That's why I will either join them in a coalition government and give them what they want, or just take over their program. That's why this is a Pyrrhic victory. If European policymakers now pursue a clear-cut pro-European agenda, they will lose in the long haul. Because right populist parties will convince the voters, and then policymakers have to adopt to their points either way. So the second option policymakers face is, okay, they stop with propelling European integration. They said, okay, listen, it was a bad idea after all, the right populists are right, the nation is the prime point of reference we should rely on. If they do that, right-wing parties will not increase in voter support because the voters will lack the conception of a problem. If no political party wants to propel European integration, a party against European integration is not needed. So, if you stop propelling European integration, right populist parties will probably not increase in voter share, will probably go down sooner or later, but you will of course not tackle remaining weaknesses in the European governance structure either. So you have the trade-off. This leaves the third option, which is my closing statement. The third option is the most complicated option and it's the most risky option. But for pro-European parties, it's also the most beneficial option. If we scrutinize right populist parties' campaigns, what they do is they portray migration in the European Union as a threat to the national interest. However, the national interest may be defined. In the Scandinavian case, the right populists basically argue, well listen, migration, the European Union is a threat to the high level of social security in Norway, Denmark, Sweden. In France, they say, well, you know, France used to be superpower and we have this laïcité, and now basically you have all these Muslims kicking in and they run counter to the very narrative that made France strong. let's just kick out the European Union, let's just kick out the Muslims, and France will be a world power again. In the German case, you say, well, you know, the AfD says, we're not against the European Union per se. But these Greeks, you know, they don't work. Italians are lazy, and the Spanish just build houses. They should invest in education instead. We, the hardworking Germans, we reformed our economy. We built this country from ruins of the Second World War. Why the hell can these guys just do the very same as we do? If we wire money to Greece, we basically belittle the story that made our nation strong. Hard work, industriousness, German virtues. That's why I'm not against the Greeks, I'm just saying you, these guys are a threat to our nation. That's why we should better kick them out instead of supporting them. And this narrative, how the right populists portray the external intrusion, the EU or migrants, is the key how pro-European policymakers can tackle the issue. If European policymakers say, you know, European integration is awesome because Europe is awesome, the voters won't buy that. But if European policymakers say, hey, listen, we ought to propel European integration, not for the mere fact because we like the French and the British so much, but just for the mere fact that this is the very national interest we are protecting here. It lies in the very national interest that the euro doesn't break, because it's our savings attached to this. It's in our very national interest that the British, the French and the Germans have a common security policy, because alone the Russians and Americans will tell us what to do. So listen, I do not want to propel a European foreign policy here. I just want to make sure that British, French and German interests are catered to in the very best way. If they do that, the voters will say, hey listen, the European Union project is not a threat to our identity, it's in fact protecting our national interests. The trick is though, in order to achieve this goal, you need to have a lot of political energy invested in, this is a key term, in reframing European integration as lying in the very national interest, as being, to be very clear about this, a very selfish interest of the nation. You do that to protect your nation. And if you get the newspapers to report on this, that the CDU, the Tories, whoever, has an idea of the European Fiscal Union, but they do that to protect their own savings, to protect their own soldiers, and the force. This is a very different story. The problem in this is so three snacks, then I'm done. The one thing is, say the Netherlands and Britain, the established mid-right parties do not devote any political energy to explain their European decisions. And if they say, Europe is awesome, we do this. This is the wrong way to go. Secondly, you need the media on board with this. As I emphasized over and over, if the media doesn't report on this, it doesn't matter what the conservatives or the mid-right liberal does. So the media contacts are key. And the third thing, that's the most important thing, if this strategy fails, if you can't communicate this to the public properly, then this is the best time right populist parties can ever find. Because then they can say, hey listen, these guys again lied to you, they didn't stick with the promises, and again, they pretended to protect the national interests, but in fact what they did is they propelled European integration for the sake of European freedom or whatnot. They didn't do that for us. They did that for the French or the Italians, or even worse, the German case. They did that for the Greeks. For the Greeks, didn't do that for us. So if this strategy fails, then it's the perfect blueprint for right populist parties to attack established parties as selling out the national interests and being a bunch of liars in London, Paris, and Berlin. That's it. I'm looking forward to your comments, and if you like, you can find the study and other information on our webpage.
Excuse me, I feel I must intervene and demand the right to reply on behalf of UKIP, and I lead the 24-strong UKIP delegation. We absolutely reject your proposition that we are, in some sense, far right. You refer to the mid-right parties, I assume you mean the Conservative Party in the UK, and you're characterising us as right. On many measures, we are to the left of the Conservative Party. We are a common-sense party, not left or not right. We are drawing support from former Conservatives, but also in many cases from former Labour voters, former Lib Dem voters, former non-voters. So we reject this characterisation of being a right party.
Excuse me, sir, I think in the best...
I'm demanding, we've been criticised, I want the right to reply, please.
Well, the format of the debate is that we are
told that being Eurosceptic is being right-wing. There is no connection at all. Believing in freedom and democracy is not of itself right-wing. We believe in national freedom and democracy on the basis of the benefit of our nation. And if I may say in conclusion, your proposition that your strategy should be to go to the people and the media and say we support European integration because it's in our national interest, I can tell you this, the media and the people in Britain will not believe you.
Hear, hear.
I think it was in the... I was trying to refer to the best traditions of British parliamentarism in which we respect the rules and the formats of how it goes.
And the right to reply is always recognised.
No, I understand that, sir, but I think the format is that to the study we will then have people who came here in order to comment on them, and then of course you will have the opportunity to reply, which you've already done without allowing me to explain the format in detail, but please now then...
That's how it works in the House of Commons.
Well...
You can learn much from the House of Commons.
Well...
This place especially.
Well... then if we can all
We
get
have a
down...
democracy for 1,000 years, unlike this country.
Well... I'm sure
you also respect the Speaker in the House of Commons.
Well...
Yes, not the one we have
He's chairing the debate.
not the one we have right now, sir. He's
No,
a scandal.
I think we can... Thank you, sir, thank you. I think we can go on with the discussion now, and let me introduce... we're Hungarians, so we're also used in the European Parliament of having issues with respect. Let me just introduce the people who will be giving the comments in alphabetical order and the order in which they will be speaking. That's Florian Herpleb, Research Associate of the Martin Center for European Studies. Erika Meyers, Editor of Green European Foundation and the publication of Populism in Europe. Gesine Meissner, who is of course a member of the ALDE group in the European Parliament and also the host of the discussion, and Clara Sandelind, who is editor of Taking Command of the Debate, Multi-Level Responses in the Anti-Migration Argument. And let me then give the word to Mr. Florian Herpleb to give his comments on the study.
Yeah, thanks a lot, first of all for the invitation, secondly for the excellent study I went through. I think it's very useful to combine the phenomenon of populism not only as a phenomenon itself, what many studies are doing, but especially in relationship with the media and possible reaction strategies from the mainstream parties. Certainly, the phenomenon of populism is a challenge for all pro-European parties. Just to give you some examples of the campaigning from some radical right-wing populist parties, these are quotations. Europe is of interest because I fight it with all my strength. Or another one, the EU is an undemocratic monster. Or another one, anybody wanting to lead Europe into the future must go back down the road towards national currencies. Or another one, whenever the EU is involved, you get problems. These quotations were well known cited in the media, not only in Europe, but also beyond Europe. These leaders are well known. Marine Le Pen, as you mentioned, Geert Wilders, as you studied, Heinz Christian Strache from Austria, and Timo Soini from Finland. So in general, populist parties are on the rise, certainly, but as you said, I think it's also very important. Not in every country. We have some important countries in Europe without any populist parties. For example, Spain or Portugal. despite the economic crisis, interestingly enough. It's also, I think, another fruitful point for the discussion, if the right-wing populists really are gaining ground from the economic crisis or not. I think it's not 100% true. There are some countries, Greece, Hungary, for example, but also Portugal or Spain, for the non-examples for them. Germany, we have to discuss this with this new party, Alternative for Germany. It also verifies the thesis that populism or these new parties, let's say like that, are a challenge for all political parties. We just had these votes, or the elections in Germany in 3 countries, and the Alternative for Germany, they got votes from the post-communist or from the socialist parties, but as well from the center-right party. It simultaneously, another phenomenon is that the rise of the AfD is simultaneously with the fall of the Liberal Party, the Freedom Democratic Party of Germany, which was always a very important part in the German history since we established the democracy. And the AfD, the new party, are saying now even, they're claiming we are the better liberals. We are replacing the FDP. The FDP is not needed anymore. Of course, it's also kind of party propaganda, but nobody knows in which direction it will go. And you said it's kind of a populist party. Maybe we also can discuss it, because it shows that there are populist parties in some countries. When we had just the elections in Sweden, Swedish Democrats got stronger. We had the elections in Finland. A new party almost got almost 20%. We have the rise of UKIP. So we have some new political parties, let's say like that, entering the political sphere. And the rise of right-wing and national populists has come to the expense of all traditional parties. Sometimes you can read that the rise of the populist parties linked with the center-right. In some countries, yes. For example, in the past, Austria is a very good example for that, or the Netherlands. But in some countries, the populist parties entered the working class, because they are saying we are the speak of the ordinary man, and they also enter, for example, in Denmark, also the traditional voters from the Social Democrats. So it's certainly a phenomenon for all political parties. As you said, what is the right strategy? I think this is a very important point for the discussion, not only concerning the whole framework of the European integration, but also bring the parties in the power. We have examples in many countries from different examples, from strict demarcation, approximation, toleration model with minority government. This, for example, we had in Scandinavia or in Netherlands, or the cooperation within coalitions. Interestingly enough, in 2 countries, populist parties are in power. Countries which are not member of the EU, Switzerland and Norway. And in Norway, the liberal conservative Høyre party changed their strategy. The populist party, the progress party, was excluded, but after the elections they decided to bring them in. So that's another important point for the discussion, how to deal with them. Because also that we have no populist international in Europe. So we had some concerns also from the media. The Economist wrote, we have a European Tea Party movement, but the phenomenon is highly heterogeneous. It's true that it's not only a right-wing phenomenon. When you, for example, see the economic or social policies, sometimes these parties are left-wing, and there are differences concerning xenophobia, radicalism between the parties. We have some poor Eurosceptical parties, we have some very radical parties. So I would want to bring them all together, to say, for example, UKIP is the same like Jobbik in Hungary. I think there are big differences within the parties, and sometimes in the media they bring everything together. So 5 conditions are crucial to the formation and growth of right-wing and national populist parties. First of all, a critical mass of floating voters. Secondly, you studied this, also immigration and criticism of Europe as decisive issues in public debates. Thirdly, the openness of key parts of the media to extremely and highly simplified representations of the EU and immigration issues. Then the fourth point, the institutional conditions of the electoral system, also a very important point. For example, also due to the situation in UK, also when I think some countries have the 4% threshold or 5% threshold, these are also very important institutional points. And the existence of a charismatic leader or the so-called political entrepreneur. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, you can describe him actually as a political entrepreneur. His political party is a one-man show and has nothing to do with traditional right-wing populist parties such as the Freedom Party of Austria, for example. As I said, very important to analyze the strategic behavior of the established democratic parties. It's a challenge for all political parties, and two policy areas are especially relevant. First of all, the question how the respective countries are regulating the immigration issue. This you started, and secondly, the European integration issue. What we also can see in the last years is that Euroscepticism is a trademark for all populist parties. The criticism and polemic against Europe in recent years has intensified, and as I said at the beginning, became the central point for the campaigning. New parties need attention and media coverage to spread their ideas, and that's a very important added value of the study, to see the changes in the last years. When you see now the alarmist reports in all the German media about the Alternative für Deutschland, what does it mean for the established party? What does it mean for the democracies? Are the voters Democrats? Are non-Democrats? Is this party called the New Liberals? Is it a new pirate party? Is it a protest phenomenon? Is it a new challenge for the CDU? So many different questions are surrounding, and in general, the rise of these new parties, not that they stay in the label as flash party, just coming and disappearing, such as the pirates in Sweden and Germany. They have to have close ties with the media, and especially with the tabloid media. So the rise of the Freedom Party of Austria is certainly linked with close connections with the Kronenzeitung. So Jörg Haider, the former leader of the Freedom Party, had very close ties with the Kronenzeitung, and the tabloid newspapers constantly broadcasted his xenophobic messages, although the issues of immigration, the so-called Politikverdrossenheit, and also increasingly the Euroscepticism. So certainly, to understand the populist parties, you have to have a closer look what you did on the relationship between the populist parties and the media. So, in general, as you said, with your three options, there is no one ideal solution that mainstream parties can adopt to deal with these kind of political parties. The faint hope that internal divisions will lead them to self-destruct, as has been the case at various times, for example for the Danish Focus Party, the Slovak National Party, the Freedom Party in Austria, or some other political parties, is not a rule. Once populist parties have established themselves in a country, it is virtually impossible to get rid of them. The best strategy, and this is my conclusion, is to prevent their rise in the first place. It is, however, too late for this in a number of European countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for our next speaker, Erika Meyers, from the editor of the Green European Foundation, please go ahead with your comment on the study.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm impressed with the work you did in such a short notice. So that's very impressive, and I read it with a lot of interest. But I also have some questions. I think that's why I was invited. So I want to draw your attention to a book we made. I'm from the Dutch Green Foundation on populism in Europe a few years ago, and it's also available in German. So if you're interested, I have a few copies. Please come and I'll give one to you. I have some issues with the definitions of what the whole research is about. Maybe I first have to say I am not really a specialist in campaigning research and voting research. I'm more looking at the whole thing from a more political, philosophical perspective. So maybe that's, so I'm going more to that side and try to give a little bit of a broader scope to the analysis. I think there are three elements in your research which are not necessarily connected in my point of view. One is populism, one is radical or extreme right or far right, and the third is Euroscepticism. And I think the three of them can be connected, but they are not necessarily are connected. So I think it's very important to really know what we are talking about. It's very common to put everything in one pot because we're sort of afraid of everything. I don't think it's very helpful. So I think it's very important to really look exactly what we are talking about here. And I think your research is mostly on Euroscepticism, which you can find in a lot of parties today. I think it's important, so I look to two definitions you give. One is on populism, where you say it's some combination of racism, xenophobia, nationalism, and law and order. That's the definition in the research.
Outrageous.
I would say, I would frame it a little bit different. Although it is a very difficult concept and there is a lot of debate going on about this, so maybe we should skip the term in really political discussions. Maybe that would be helpful because everybody is speaking about something different most of the time. I would say populism is, populists are people who are claiming to speak in the name of the people. And in the same time, a spokesman also framing, of course, what people think. So it goes two ways. The populus, meaning common people, in Latin. So the concept of people is very important. And just to provoke you a little bit, I want to say that the word democracy is actually very close to the word populism.
Yeah, yeah.
Because demos is also meaning people in Greek, so it's a bit more sophisticated than in Latin. As we know, it was always the Greeks, always a bit more sophisticated. But demos is also meaning people, and we are also sitting here because we want to represent the people. And it is a very difficult discussion, who is the people? And of course, this I don't agree with you on that, but I think it is an important debate. And we have some representation issues, I think, all over Europe and all our parliaments. Who is really are the people and the different layers of our population, are they really represented? So I think there is some homework to do for the mainstream parties there. And a lot of we are very often very afraid for populism, and it's mostly the same arguments as the aristocrats had against democracy 200 years ago. So that's really interesting. They say, well, these are people, they don't know what they're talking about, they're not fit for being such a high level, it's all too simple. And I think sometimes it is useful to be simple, sometimes you have to be simple, and sometimes things are very clear also. But of course it is a debate what it is about. So I think we should not be so afraid of populist parties because they are part of a democracy. Until, of course, they are starting to promote violence measures. There is a clear-cut limit. And I think if they are not respecting the rights we have in all our constitutions, then you have to really be clear about that. But otherwise, I think they also put the finger on some spots, weak spots in our political system. and we really have to look at that very seriously. So that's maybe interesting also to discuss it later. In the other thing, Euroscepticism. I also state what there is in a footnote about the meaning of it, saying that you don't see it as a campaigning against certain aspects of the European integration, but as a calling for a return to the nation state as a prime source of political power instead of supranational or intergovernmental arrangements. And then I'm not really sure if you are keeping really up to your own definitions, because a little further on in the paper, you're talking about the Germans, which I found very interesting, about Alexander Dobrindt of the CSU and CDU, and you say he's a Eurosceptic. But I think he is criticizing the policies of the EU and not necessarily the European integration as such. So there is a trap, talking about Euroscepticism. It is a difficult trap, I think, because the things are very linked. You can be against European cooperation on any level, or you can be against this kind of Europe. And I think it's also important that we don't confuse the two of them. Because you can be, for very different reasons, very critical about all kinds of European measures without being against European integration or cooperation. So, and sometimes then it's easy to say, oh, you're a Eurosceptic, and you're just criticizing a certain law or direction. So that's the second point I wanted to make. Let's see what else. I have a lot of stuff, but I don't. But yeah, maybe it's interesting to go a bit into the Dutch situation. Why is Geert Wilders losing? And I think you are very right, or what you say in the paper, that of course the Liberal Party, the VVD, which is both a liberal and a conservative party. You have two wings, in fact, and they're always fighting. They took over the Eurosceptical stand. So it's true that people who wanted to vote against Europe, they didn't need to vote for Wilders. They could also vote for the Liberal Party. But I think there is some more to it. Why people did that? Because 2 months before the European elections, we had also municipal elections, and at the end of that, Geert Wilders was in a cafeteria in The Hague, claiming victory, and or not, because he also lost. But okay, there was a meeting of all the party members of the PVV. Well, I cannot say party members, because the PVV has no party members. It's not a democratic organization. The only member of the PVV is Geert Wilders himself. So it's more followers of Wilders who were there. And Geert Wilders, he was making this statement, and he was sort of provoking the people there by saying, do we want more Europe? And then people say, no, less, less, less. And then he said, do we want more Moroccans in this country? And everybody says, less, less, less. So the atmosphere was very threatening, and a lot of people really were afraid. And a few people in the parliament of the PVV, they left the party, and they left also the parliament because of that. So I think that was also a reason why people who are Eurosceptic in this particular political moment, then I rather go to the Liberal Party than just after this whole debate on less Moroccans in the country. And I also think, okay, the shock effect of Geert Wilders is a bit gone after all the years he's there. People are sort of tired, and we have gotten used to him. So okay, there you go again. Okay, well, I look the other round, and then we go on with the real discussion. So the shock effect is not really working anymore, and it's very hard for him to go over the top because he was already very high up there. So that's also playing a role, and And then he turned to Europe, and I think he did that because his core subject, which is Islam bashing, really, was not so much on the agenda anymore. Since the economic crisis, people were a lot more concerned about social economic themes than about cultural and religious themes. So, and there Geert Wilders was not very clear in his politics because while coming from the Liberal Party, he has a sort of mix of left-wing and right-wing policies, and he's not very clear on these issues. So when it comes to the economic crisis, a lot of people are not really thinking he's very important, and so the Islam issue is from the agenda, and then he put on the European topic. But I think he is not really interested in the whole European debate. I don't even know if you can. Well, of course he's a nationalist, so in that way he's also Eurosceptic. But he is. I think he needs Europe because he wants the borders closed for immigration. And then, well, since a lot of regulations are at European level, that's why he wanted to go to Europe to organize this on the European level. And then when he could not get in because well the group he wanted was not organized in the parliament, and then he lost interest. He's never here, I suppose. Do you ever see him here? I don't think so. So he lost interest, and now he went back to his really his core business, which is anti-Islam ideology. So I think that the picture is a bit bigger and a bit more complicated than only the Eurosceptic thing. So maybe to finish on the strategy, I think it is not enough to have a campaigning strategy. I think you can maybe shoot yourself in the foot when you choose what you propose to say, okay, Europe is interesting for the national interest as well, which is of course often the case, but it's not always the case. And I think sometimes you have to really go a little bit deeper than just the campaigning and the voting strategies. And look, what are the liberals, which you are, most of you? What is really your thing? What is important to the liberals, and that you should really go for, I think. And take it from there for the voting strategies. And I think you should. A lot of liberal parties, I don't think in the parliament, but in the national parliaments, are also liberal parties are constantly saying that Europe forces all these laws on us, and in the Netherlands they do it a lot, and that's why okay, we cannot move anymore, we have no space anymore, we are losing sovereignty here, and in reality that's completely it's not the point, because all the national parliaments, they are accepting all these laws from Europe. So there is a clear national step, and it's not. Do I have to stop? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just make my list. Okay. Then without. Okay. So stop, please, saying that Europe is forcing all the laws on the national governments, and I think people want to have a say in politics. That's what it's all about. So that's really something we should work on, and I think you should stress the relation between the universal and the individual rights, because a lot of populist parties say, like in the Netherlands, Wilders says he is defending the individual rights, the rights of women, of homosexuals, etc. But he nationalizes those rights. And I think in a good liberal tradition you should fight with him and with this kind of argumentation, and stress that those rights are universal rights and not nationalist rights, and that is a very important point, I think. And then there is a lot of and then the whole social welfare state and the equality issues, I think that is why people don't like euro, because they do not benefit from it, you know? And that is true for a lot of people. If you are a truck chauffeur and you go working in the Netherlands, you're from Poland, you don't get the same wage. So yeah, there you have a lot of tensions, and it's completely understandable that the Dutch truck chauffeurs are hating the Polish truck chauffeurs because they take their jobs away. So Europe has to arrange that you are paid the same, you have the same wage for the same job in the same country. And things like that are really important. Okay, I could go on, but I stop for the moment.
Thank you very much. It's a very big topic. Many people little time, so excuse me.
No,
let
no,
me
you're
just,
right.
without further ado, give the word to our host, Gesine Meissner. Gesine Meissner, please go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I really will not only try, but do it shorter than the former speakers. And I just give you my point of view from my politician. I'm a politician, I'm a liberal German politician, and so I just wanted to come from this. But at first I was asked by the author to drive your attention again, to drive your attention to the study who's laying just aside the camera, I think. So in case you are really interested, you can push it forward. And well, I have in short 4 different points to tell you. First, the phenomenon of populism. Populism really, for my understanding, is a way of giving simple answers to complicated problems. And that's something I, as politician, for my own behavior, don't like, because I think policy is quite difficult and it's quite diverse. And so if you just concentrate on a simple answer to a complicated question, then you kind of betray people. That's what I feel. But of course, maybe it's wiser for a politician to be more populistic. That's what I wanted to tell you in advance. And for example, my experience since 2009, since I was elected in the European Parliament, whenever I had been in any reunion in Germany, in any seminar, whatever, and I'm a transport politician, whenever I, for example, talked about transport policy, one of the first questions was out of the audience, whether they were liberal or not, why do we support the lazy and corrupt Greek people with our very solid German money? And so that was really a simple, quite populistic question. And then my first answer was always, I know some Greek people who are really steady and good ones and work in a solid way. And I know some German people, I could tell you, some who are corrupt and lazy. So the world is not that easy. That's just to tell you in advance. And I think all the efforts to do a populistic approach, that's what my conviction is not right against people. But maybe I'm wrong in that. That's what I wanted to tell you first. Giving simple answers and not coming to all the different sides of a medal can be really, kind of a betray. That's what my one thesis is, for example. Of course, people are scared for their future, and of course, it's very important for us to think about people's concerns and to come with a good solution for them. And from my opinion, Europe is the answer for their problems. And of course, for example, in Germany, we can really show by figures that whenever we had another new country in the enlargement process of the EU, especially Germany, profited out of it. Not everybody in Germany, has a glorious life right now. That's what we have to concentrate on as well. But I just want to tell you, it's really a profit for us. It had been a profit for us, and I'm fighting for more EU, because I think for Germany it's the right way to go. For German people, for all of them. That was my first point. Second point, I'll come back to that a little bit in the last point. The second point is the media. You said that media is of high importance. Well, of course, it's absolutely true. That's what we politicians know. That's why some people say politicians have to be more in the media maybe than in discussions, just in order to tell people what they want to do. Maybe that's right. And media, of course, can make politics as well. And for media, new movements and regarding political groups are always absolutely exciting. Because everything that's new is of interest for readers. That's usually the thinking of media. And that's why, of course, it should be a job for us politicians to convince media to just write about our approach of politics. That's right. But sometimes, if, for example, the pirates were mentioned in Germany, when the pirates arose in Germany, all the media were writing about the pirates. And some people, even very conservative people, who never had anything to do with internet, thought, oh, so young, nice people, why shouldn't we vote for them? Just for fun or because it's new or so. So sometimes there are new movements coming up of society development, and then may arise and disappear again. And of course, that's what happens, for example, seems to be happening with Wilders. In Germany, we have now the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, and it's right now in the rising process. And for us liberals, it's a big problem to face that. So, and medias play quite a role. They don't like the AfD, but they don't like us either. So we have to think about solution. I'm very frank right here in talking about, of course, what is our concerns. A third point, in short, what has happened in the European Parliament since the election? Since the election, we have really more people on the right side, so to say, and who are sitting on the right side than we had before. And so the majority and the parliament is different than it had been before. Before, it was a very big EPP, it was a little bit smaller S&D. We have been the third force, now we are the fourth liberals. But anyway, and we never had so many people who are non-attached, who are without any political group. And they are all sitting right. Maybe they are not all right-wing from their point of view, but they are sitting there. And they are mainly, or many of them are behaving in a national approach to political solutions. And that's what the majority of the EP and of the voters in EU obviously don't support. That's what we can just admit. And for example, of course, we did react in some ways. For example, in the Econ Committee, the leader of the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, he was running for vice president for this committee, and he didn't have the majority of the committee. The committee always has to vote for the proposals in favor or against. Usually you always vote in favor because it's just a proposal from the political groups. But in this case, they said, if there is somebody who is against the euro, who doesn't want the euro anymore in future, or at least wants to throw, so to say, the southern part out and have a northern and a southern euro, and is against this integration process, then he couldn't be a vice chair of a committee. That was the explanation for that.
In every committee.
Not in every committee, only in some of them, and it was always
was stitched up in
it was
every
not
single
in
committee.
Okay, let me please continue. I have another fourth point. This was just in short what happened right now in Parliament. Of course, we have to see how the political work will be done, how the majorities in voting procedures with legislative process will come out. We don't know yet because Parliament is new and we just start our work. Last point. Is it the right strategy, what you proposed? I make a little bit of question mark, and just because what I said when I started. And I can mention, for example, in our German Liberal Party, it was a discussion in the European campaign, how pro-European shall we be? Because, of course, in general, liberals in Germany are absolutely convinced the European integration is a good thing, but there is a big but. Is it done in the right way? Is too many power in the Commission or so on? So of course it's discussed. I like in all the other parties as well. I think in our program debates as well. And so what was the outcome? Finally, we were like maybe conservatives and socialists, pro-European, but. That was almost all the parties in Germany, besides, for example, the AfD. The AfD had posters with the German flag, and they said not more Europe, but more Germany. And so that's what's really, I didn't like it all. I like my German flag. Of course, I feel like a German person, and I'm proud if they win a medal in the Olympic Games, but it's not something about politics. And politics, I would like to come forward with a European solution. And that's why I kind of hated these kind of coming out from AfD, but they were successful because some people thought the solution lies in Germany. And two more points that I really can finish. First, European values. We have very high European values, and we have a charter, so to say, in our treaty that really is to be defended in everything what we do. And some point in the European value, maybe you think it's strange, but the liberal thing talks about that, is solidarity. for me, solidarity between member states is quite important. And you know that Europe is a peace project. It really was built, the European Union, it was started after the Second World War, because so many people, and that's what my parents told me at home, so many people thought we never want to be forced to fight against our neighbors, like it was done so for years and hundreds of years, so to say, almost between Germany and France, for example. That's what we don't want. So we try to defend our not only our freedom but our peace as well. And besides, of course, Europe has a demographic problem. You know that we have less people. The population is decreasing, and if we want to be elite in the competitiveness global-wide, then we have to think about what can we do in order to stay important and to stay an important player worldwide. Well, you all know that Europe in this way is a solution as well. From the German standpoint, right now, we are still in the 10th position if it comes to economical strength in the world, but we are losing this position, that's what we know, and that counts for all the other member states as well. So I think if we stay together, Europe has a bigger voice and can do much more for people and jobs. And that's what I would like to achieve for my people. Yeah, peace on the one hand side, on the other side really growth and jobs and a good situation to live in. And that's why I think really populistic approaches, nationalistic answers are not the right ones.
Well, the British population.
Thank you so much, Bettina Meister, and for our fourth speaker, Clara Sanderlind, editor of Taking Command of the Debate Political Response to the Anti-Migration Argument. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I know everyone's really keen to start debating now, so I'm going to try, as everyone else has said, to be short, but I will really try. I'll just start by inviting you to the launch of this book, which actually changed name, so the title is something different. But it's on November the 5th here as well, so you're all very welcome to the launch of that study. So I just wanted to make 3 points in relation to the study. The first one is about nationalism and the importance of focusing on nationalism rather than racism and to understand nationalism. The second is that I think what the study highlights as really important is to focus on policy preferences and voters. And the third, which relates to the first point, is how we understand nationalism and national self-determination, because I think that's kind of at the core of this debate. So to just go through these points before we start the debate. So firstly, even though the study is focusing on Euroscepticism, then obviously these debates are very much connected to anti-immigration rhetoric as well. And what's important to focus on here, and which I thought Timo did, but maybe I missed one of the footnotes, is to completely, not completely, but more or less separate these concerns from racism, because it's a way to stigmatise voters, and it's not drivers either of anti-immigration sentiments or of voting support for some of these parties. So there are, of course, if you look statistically, there are higher levels of racism amongst voters of populist parties, but the majority or the vast majority of these voters are not racist. It's not driving these sentiments. So focusing on that particular aspect will only further stigmatise voters. So that's just a short point about that. And when I say focus on nationalism, which I will return to in the third point, I also think we really need to talk about what we mean by nationalism, and not just say nationalism and that's everything that we don't like, because most main parties in Europe or well in the world hold national self-determination as a key principle, and that's essentially nationalism. And it's a very, very broad term which liberals have very different understanding of than, for example, populist parties, and that's what we need to discuss, that we have different understandings of this, not that we fundamentally do not agree about national self-determination. Well, you might disagree with that, but then you have to kind of say that I'm against that, I'm a cosmopolitan, etc. Okay, so the second point that I want to focus on is, which I think is very clear from Timo's study, that and from the three alternatives that you gave in the end, is that what actually really drives support is policy preferences. So people vote for a party, populist or not, because they like that party's policies, which shouldn't maybe be a very controversial thing to say, but that's sometimes misunderstood. So we try to look at social structural explanations. What are the economic conditions, or what are these protest votes, and there must be something else that drives support. It can't be that people actually have certain opinions that accord to the opinions of the parties they vote for. But that might actually be the case, which means that we need to focus on those policies themselves. And Timo's already given us some examples of how you could do that, and I just wanted to highlight two other points of how sort of not to do it. And the first one is that while we need to respect people's opinions and people's concerns, you don't respect people by simply agreeing with them or saying, okay, we'll just give you what you want, even though actually we don't really agree with that. That's actually a very disrespectful point of view, because it shows that you're not willing to engage with people in an argument. And if you do respect people as political equals, then you do engage with argument, and you do say, I have a very different view on, for example, Europe than you have, and let's discuss this. So, and I think this was your point in the end as well, that actually work out what your own position is and then argue for that position. And the second point, what sort of not to do, is to come up with policies simply to please voters. So, for example, from the UK, there's been a cap on immigration, which is clearly impossible to execute, and that's very obvious to voters as well. And then on the other hand, you have policies that kind of come across as, or may come across to voters again as dishonest. So, for example, Labour's proposed that if you, again in the migration example, if you hire a migrant, a British company, then you should take on a British apprentice as well, which seems like a very, to me, quite a bureaucratic policy, which is simply there to sort of address a political situation and strategy rather than seeing as a sort of genuine policy. And I think again that may portray a quite disrespectful view of voters and their actual real concerns. Okay, so to move on to my last point about national self-determination and nationalism. So the issues that were raised in the study and the sort of driver of the parties is, say, nationalism, anti-establishment, and sort of more cultural concerns rather than just economic ones. And I think what unites all these three positions is a sense of violation of national self-determination. So we can no longer control our borders. We are subject to power both from domestic elites and from elites in the EU. And that's something that's really serious to address, because that's a very big democratic deficit. If people feel like they can't actually control their political environment, and it's not necessarily just a feeling. In many cases, it's very real, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. Both how we can control our environment, political and social and economic environment, but also what it means to be national self-determinating in a sort of globalised and European world. So you will have, again from the UK, there will be a lot of critique against the European Charter of Human Rights, where some notions of sort of national self-determination there seems to entail that unless everything is decided within national parliament, then there can't be national self-determination. Whereas others might agree that, well, there are some things that are beyond and above. So we agree that violations of human rights in Syria and Iraq, for example, are more important than national self-determination in those cases, or no, might not be the best examples, but that there are some things that might be beyond national interest that we may also want to take account, migrants' rights as well. So you might not agree with this, but at least it's within the concept of what we mean with national interest, where liberals and others disagree, and that's kind of what we have to debate, rather than just saying you're a nationalist, you're not a nationalist, because we don't really know what that entails unless we have a debate about what it means to be self-determining. And then there are issues of, we just had the Scottish vote on Scottish independence in the UK, and there are a lot of people trying to make the case that, you can be Scottish, you can have Scottish identity, you can have self-determination within Scotland to some certain extent, you can still be British, so you can have the same debate, we have had the same debate for ages about the EU, but to actually address that seriously. Same with migration, how can we have open borders within the EU, but still be able to control and feel like we have a sense of control of the effects and consequences of migration? Is that possible to combine, and how do you do that in that case? What sort of integration regimes would you have to have in place, for example, citizenship regimes? So it's a way to discuss, how can we still be self-determining within this world we live in, as liberals and otherwise. So that's what I think I wanted to say, basically. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Our author will not react to everything, but he did ask for a couple sentences. And then I will open the debate for the audience. Go ahead, please, Timo.
I want to make one statement very clear. I urge you all to take with you from this debate. I am here not as a politician, but as a researcher who is not committed to any political party, but to how I describe and how I can measure reality. And now we have the issue on the table. There is a new party forming in Europe. We do not know why they are here. What the fuck? Some people wonder, maybe we should get rid of them. This is the issue on the table. And now what we have here is the following. We have a bunch of commentators who stem from an array of political parties in Europe. And we talk about the European Union. And then we hear, it's difficult. It's about philosophical questions. It's a complex issue, the national interest, and so forth. And then you have had the very outspoken gentleman from the United Kingdom who said it's not complicated. It's about democracy and about the national interest. And if you would not work for the European Parliament, whom would you listen to? Someone who says it's about democracy and the nation? Or someone who says, it's highly complicated. I need 45 minutes to explain this to you. So if you wonder why right populist parties rise, think about the last 2 hours. And if you wonder how you can prevent them from rising, think about this debate, how you should not tackle what they say. This is very important to take away, a message you might not like, but this thing explains 10,000 pages of research within 1 hour.
What a waste of trees.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There and there and there, and there, and then we'll. Yeah, please go ahead. Yes, and yes, we have half an hour, so please keep your comments and questions really, really brief, because I do want to give 5 minutes at the end for our speakers to have an opportunity to respond. Go ahead.
I just have 5 points. No, kidding. No, I would. My name is Sophia Kabir, and my colleague and I are here on behalf of the foundation Ce n'est pas une crise. And this foundation is trying to find solutions against identity populism, because we agree with everything that has been said. Populism itself does not imply any content or any political theory. It's a political methodology, and a very beautiful example of populism used on the other side, so to speak, is Obama's Yes We Can campaign, which was emotional, simplistic, and tapped into the feelings of the population. It spoke according to the word on the street in the United States. So it's being used on all sides. Populism itself is not sufficient as a term. Identity populism, however, refers to any form of populism that is using the method of scapegoating, creating this artificial image of the other, being minorities, being the elite, the European elite, etc., creating this sort of enemy image, scapegoating against minorities, and so any form of dangerous populism. That's how we address the topic. My question, however, refers to the very interesting research, and I think your conclusion, your proposal of solution is very interesting. I would, however, maybe add the aspect of emotions to it. So other than only saying we will have to communicate that the European Union is working on behalf of national interest, perhaps we have to also prevent populist movements from monopolizing emotions. Because so far they tap into a very real fear that exists in the European Union and that has to be taken seriously. And that is referring to societal transformations that confuses people and creates identity insecurities. If we allow the populist movements to monopolize this emotion and this fear, we're already sort of have lost this aspect in the population. And the other point is to perhaps maybe also add that we have to communicate the successes of the European Union. So say what freedoms did it bring? It is not perfect. It is a work in progress. It is not finished. But what freedoms do we have? And perhaps play the game of, okay, answering to the Eurosceptic. I think one very important point is to answer to the populists and not let them have a debate with themselves, but actually listen to them and answer to them. And say, okay, you're against the European Union, that's very interesting. Let's play this game to the end and take away this framework. Where would we be without it? Where would each country be? Where would the individual citizen be? Would the global economy be more, our position in the global economy be more successful or not? It is not perfect, but would we be better off without it? And play this game to the end.
Much better off without it.
Well,
Okay, can I just
and also, a final point, my father always said, those who shout lie.
Let's just say, ladies and gentlemen, the reason you're all getting it wrong is there's no such thing as left and right. It's authoritarian v libertarian. UKIP are a libertarian party, as our colleagues in
Except for gays,
Czech Republic and Sweden.
I thought you were in favour of letting people speak, you buffoon.
Right, let me just so it's authoritarian v libertarian, and the Liberals are the most authoritarian of the lot because they tell people not to smoke, not drive this sort of car, this, you must have this, you must have that. There's nothing more authoritarian than the Liberals in this place. Okay. The professional political class, that's what it's all about. The revolution in England, where UKIP and in Scotland, where UKIP came top of the poll, was because the people are fed up with the professional political classes. You guys, they're fed up, they all. I'm just a businessman here on holiday. But quite frankly, they're sick to death of you lot. And this place is the Valhalla of the bureaucrat. This is the Valhalla of the professional politician. And this is the Valhalla of authoritarian bureaucracy with a sort of veneer of socialism, you know, where the rest, you know, it's socialism for the masses and black Mercedes for the, what was it you called them? The policy makers or bureaucrats in this joint. So quite frankly, you've got it all wrong. People are sick to death of you lot. That's what it's all about. They are not fascists. They are not right-wing. Most of them are just ordinary people, sick to death of a bunch of windy so-and-sos in this place and want to get shot in a lot of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over there, sir.
Hi, my name is Amjad Bashir. I'm the bogeyman. I'm a Muslim, and I'm here on behalf of UKIP. You've spoken at quite some length. I've taken note of what you've said. But one or two things, you've spoken about the media and you've described people that are populist as some sort of lepers. Let me tell you that the media has been far from on our side. They've been, every one of them apart from one newspaper was totally against us. And that worked in our favour, because the public out there realised that we were being victimised, that we weren't being heard, that we had a voice, and we had a democratic right to champion our causes. Right, you say that the extreme right are racist. Well, here I am. Obviously, you can tell I wouldn't be part of a racist party. Right? Now, the reason is, yes, I'm a proud Muslim. I'm a proud Muslim, and out there in your parliament, every day I experience Islamophobia. And it's not coming from the extreme right parties. It's coming from general parties. There is a wind in Europe which is Islamophobic, and you have to realise and you have to counter this. Right? My party, UKIP, embraces me not because I'm Muslim, because I aspire to the greater good of Europe and in particular my country, which is the United Kingdom. Right? It's not wrong to have an immigration policy which says that you control your own borders, that you allow people into your country who add benefit to your society and who can benefit for themselves. This is not a racist policy. What is racist, what is discriminatory, is that you open your borders and allow anybody from Europe, the 500 odd million people, to come to your country without let or hindrance, but you have prohibitions on other countries like Canada, Australia, like India, Pakistan, where I came from originally, and you say, no, you can't come in, it's undemocratic, it's unreasonable, you are out of order, right? The media, as I said, have been totally against us. Our message is right. Yes, we have a dynamic leadership, but if the message wasn't right, nobody would vote for us. The message has to be right, not just a charismatic figure, and it's the message that was again and again sold and won the day. Thank you.
The gentleman who's been standing there on the blue shirt. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I'm a libertarian, as David said, and I realize that the EU is moving towards the left every year. But have we gone so far that if a party wants lower taxes, less bureaucrats, controlled borders, we brand them fascists, xenophobes, or racist or anything? Have we gone so far?
Yes, my name is Henry Ries. I'm Conseiller National with the UDI in France, and you didn't speak about Marine Le Pen, so I've got to the point. I found this study very interesting. I'm also Secretary General of Energy, Franco-Allemande. So my question is a bit technical. I'm an engineer. There are so many political thinkers. We had an event 2 weeks before the European elections with a colleague of Mrs. Meissner, Michael Theurer, and he sent me a group of ladies from Belarusi, and I should explain them French politics as German. Okay. So I realized something, that in mass media, I don't want to do a mass media bashing, but you were on this point. Marine Le Pen on the TF1, which is a private station, BFM and eTele, she had 26% of the broadcast, and we as UDI, we had zero, really zero units. So why is this possible in Europe? Mrs. Hartig organized in 2011 in London in the National Liberal Club conference by ELF, which was called Making European Elections European. Well, I didn't find that the last elections were really European. And my question, now the technical question, is why is this possible? I know, for example, in Germany there is a very strong scrutiny on the minutes which parties have. I know also in France for the national elections and for the presidential elections. Why not in the European elections? I mean, we as UDI got 11%, but you know, Marine Le Pen got 25%, and if she's got 26% of the media share, I mean, this is incredible, and you don't wonder why. Last word from Jean-Marie Cavada, he explained it to me. The media in France, first they tried to ignore the Front National, then they tried to beat them, and now they're making money with it. With them. That's what Jean-Marie Cavada, who's an MP from UDI.
Thank you. Sir, over
My name is Peter Lundgren. I come from Sweden, representing the Sweden Democrats, a party who gained hugely in the national elections just a couple of weeks ago. And I would say the problem for you guys sitting here is you have your own way of looking at democracy. Democracy for you is when people think like you and they like your ideas. The minute you are opposing a threat, like telling other ideas, then you are not talking about democracy. Then we are right-wings and we are racists and God knows whatever you will throw at us. But I will say in Sweden, they have tried many ways, like you said. They have tried everything on us. They tried to silence us. They didn't talk about us. Then they tried to demolish us in the media, like we were some kind of demons eating children for breakfast or something. Nothing actually works, because we are telling the language from the ordinary people. People who are fed up with this bureaucracy, exactly like David told. And no matter what you do, we will keep on growing as party because you don't speak the ordinary people's language. That is actually the problem.
Sir, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Afi Azwai. I work in the Parliament. I'm also from Britain, but luckily not a UKIP supporter. I just want to make 2 points about Europe, not so much about populist ideas, but maybe back to the points that probably UKIP MEPs have made. I do agree that we should debate with them, because I think if we debate with them, then soon enough the point that we're trying to make will come over and that point will go into the background. But I think also it's very important to know that if you look at the Great Depression in 1914, when the UK was a hegemonic power, the nation state or the European nations have lost their power in the world economy. Now you see the emerging rise of Brazil, of China, of Russia, and slowly the G8 has turned into G20, and no longer can one nation, carry on, as UKIP believe, that the United Kingdom is still great. Actually, to be part of Europe, and 500 million people, the largest trading bloc in the world, that's a benefit. But another point is this. I know the MEP makes a point about Islamophobia in the Parliament. Well, I've been here for 2 years. I know experienced Islamophobia, but what I can say one thing is this. I'm Muslim, I'm gay. But if I go to Poland today, I can be discriminated in a hotel, I can be discriminated in a workplace. But with the European Union and with directives and legislation from the Commission, it protects everyone. And if you just want to think about your own nation, that's fair enough. But if you think about all the other 500 million people in Europe who are being discriminated every day because their nations don't want to take action, and whether the European Union can do a job through subsidiarity, then there's a benefit of the European Union. And I think we should work towards more integration, more federalism, and not, nationalistic little ideologies.
Just come back to the study, actually, if I may. The phrase far right and what you've called right populist, which I would not necessarily share that word, but I'll use your word for this. There is a vast spectrum between far right and what you describe as right populist. So, for example, you can take from immigration anything from a concern over high population density, desire for control, to the far right, where they speak of things like repatriation, where you have genuine xenophobia. So I think we have seen that populism, as however it is defined, has grown in Europe, but the far right, I would suggest, is not. You said that you said earlier, I believe, that that we're not seeing populism in other countries. I think you actually look at someone like Spain. You see that Podemos has done very well. It's not a Eurosceptic, so it doesn't fall under your definitions. But there is that anti-establishment coming through across different countries. Now, I think when you go to the study, you have the graphs from page 23 to 25, where you look at how the Telegraph newspaper reports the Conservatives as being more Europhile, and compare that with the rise of UKIP in the United Kingdom. What you're missing is that there is a far-right party in the United Kingdom, the British National Party, and that party's support has imploded. The far-right in the United Kingdom has been virtually destroyed at the same time as the rise of UKIP. So we've moved from a position where we had a far-right party to a position where we have what you describe as a right populist party. Now that is a lurking variable, which I think goes beyond that. When you look at the Telegraph data, of course, the UKIP voters do not come from Telegraph readers. They come generally from C2, D, E socio-economic groups. They're not coming from the Telegraph readers. And I think what you're doing is you're showing a pattern, but you're missing the fact that you're showing a correlation, but you're not showing that there is a variable behind it. So there's an awful lot that is missing in terms of that study. Again, PVV started from a higher base. So it's perhaps natural. The PVV have remained as a far-right party, and their support has not increased. Where you see the Front National in France, the Front National have tried to move from far-right to what you describe as right populist. As they try to move in that direction, they are seeing their electoral support grow. And I think actually, if you make that distinction and recognise that we are all here in this room opposed to the far right, that we're all here in this room sickened by the people like Jobbik, if you realise that actually, you know, those of us, and I'm in UKIP, and yes, you know, I have colleagues who are gay, who are Muslim, and so on, because, you know, we are a party that is not what you say. You know, and so the gentleman here accused a gay speaker of being anti-gay, and I thought it was astonishing.
Yes, I think about 3
astonishing. So I think that what this study really misses, the first thing the study really misses, is the distinction between far right and populism, which I think is the result of, is what caused my colleagues' anger earlier, because they were being portrayed in the same boat as someone like Jobbik. Or, you know, or people like, you know, you see people like Jobbik, Golden Dawn, that even the Front National won't touch. You know, which really does say something. So that, I think, is the first thing. Secondly, it's not just about Europe. The rise of what you describe as right populist parties, you're speaking from a Eurocentric bubble in Brussels. But actually, when you see the rise in popularity in UKIP support, actually the difference over the last 12 months is that UKIP is now taking votes in working class Labour areas, taking votes from the centre-left, not from the centre-right. And that is being missed, the policies such as no tax on the wage and so on. These are things where actually the difference is happening now as much in Labour areas as in Conservative areas, and that is not solely or even mainly attributable to the European Union. So I think that there are a lot of things in that study which I would suggest you're missing a point from which perhaps you don't see not coming from the United Kingdom. There's an awful lot there.
How would you describe yourself then?
Libertarian.
Okay.
I mean, I have no problem with the word populist personally, but it's the question of how it's defined. Is that I see it as power to the people. So, democracy, allowing the public to call referenda on key issues, is something which unites UKIP and, for example, Beppe Grillo's five-star movement, which you could never describe as right-wing in a million years. That is a centre-left party, which is now agreed. And we're united by a belief in direct democracy. So those things are different.
Thank you. Now we have. I'm sorry. We have our last question, and then we will need to wrap up the session because then we'll empty the room because we'll get kicked out otherwise.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to talk about the study itself. You were saying about the drivers for that being the mid-right parties, and sorry, my name's Craig Rimmer from Parliament Street, British think tank. In terms of the drivers, you were talking about the mid-parties and their policy agenda, and I was wondering, and you discounted the economic drivers. I feel, just looking at the British experience, I feel like the economic drivers are quite important. UKIP do quite well. Apologies if this is wrong, you can correct me later. In seats like Clacton, where Douglas Carswell is probably going to take the seat, and in Thanet, where Nigel is going to actually run in the election, I believe. And one of the reasons is that you have these are quite deprived areas where people have had it hard through the recession, and they're looking, I think, for anti-establishment parties for this reason. And I see that as a bigger driver than what the mid-right's nuances may be on European policy in particular. I wasn't going to say anything in this debate. I just wanted to carry on in regards to your research. But just on this gay issue, I was actually objecting to you saying you were libertarian on all things when your policy on gay issues was anti-gay marriage. And your party sacked your national chair of your youth wing for having views on gay marriage.
He was supporting bestiality and necrophilia. We couldn't tell her that. I'm sorry. That's very different. Very different.
Okay, so thank you. I'm sure I certainly learned a lot about UK politics, but Also, sometimes it felt like I never left Budapest, so it felt familiar. Some of the arguments. Let me just give. We have 10 more minutes, and then we need to enter the room. So I will really ask everyone on the panel to really just 2-3 sentences, the most important things that they would like to reflect. And I will ask Felicita Medved to be the last, so that she can, as one of our hosts, close. So I don't know who wants to go ahead with the last comments. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I think we discussed now much about terminology. It's important. Of course, nobody wants to be labeled as a fascist. That's true. So we have to look very careful on the development. Swedish Democrats in the past were a neo-Nazi party, but they transformed themselves. So at a different party than in the 90s. So certainly that is very important. Second point, anti-elitism is on the rise. Bashing of politicians is on the rise. Euroscepticism, long time a silent topic, it's getting more and more importance. So the question how to communicate Europe is on the rise, and I'm also not sure if it's enough just to always say in the discussions on Europe, we need a new narrative. What should it be? So I think this is an ongoing topic, and it also shows that the topic of Europe, and this is also one of the results of the Euro crisis, is now pretty much in the media, and this I think makes studies like that very important to look how is the argumentation towards Europe, what are the arguments, and how is it then used from the political parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Timo, you want to go ahead or?
I'm going to listen to what the others say first.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Go ahead.
Do I do?
Yeah.
Okay. 3 points. First, our young libertarian said EU is moving to the left every year. Well, of course, you didn't explain what you mean by left, but in case left is more Europe and
more regulations every year.
And in case left is more Europe, more freedom, less discrimination, and more peace, then I would be happy to be left. So in case this is meant, I don't know. Okay. I said, that's just in case, I said. And, my Swedish colleague, who I know from Transport Committee, he said, you don't speak ordinary people language, and the majority is on our side. I think really the majority is on our side, not on your side. That's what I wanted to say. So obviously, maybe we are not that populistic, but maybe that anyway, majority of people in the EU thinks we are on the right way, so to say. And last point, what you said as well, you think democracy is when people think like you. That's not really what I think. I never would say this. I think democracy means giving everybody a platform to speak and to discuss whatever everybody thinks. And that's what we actually did today. And obviously it was very necessary to raise this issue and to discuss it. Well, of course, we didn't agree on things. That's what was normal for democracy. But I think this really was a very democratic thing to do today.
Thank you very much. Clara, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I'd go back a bit to the point I was making about talking about national self-determination and talking about a sense of loss of control. And I think something that's been mentioned about Clacton and sort of that voter base for UKIP stresses this need to think about what sort of control people have in their local communities, and that's actually what Liberals can stress, that's actually part of the European project, to have stronger local communities or stronger local control at the same time as we have, certain other powers nationally and then European. So you could sort of frame it that way if you wanted to, but it actually has to come with some, real policies to actually make sure that people are able to control their immediate environment and then their national as well as their European. It is, however, I'm not an expert on these voter bases and especially not all European parties, but whereas UKIP is clearly gaining votes from sort of what you were mentioning, traditional Labour voters. I know, and Conservative, but that's one. Anyway, in Sweden, for example, where the Sweden Democrats gained in the recent election, that did not seem to be the case. It seemed like, although voters did come from those sort of backgrounds, there was also a spread into more sort of higher income and higher educated background. So there was more spread of the both. So I don't know if you can say that's a sort of European trend. But in relation to being able to control the political and social environment comes the importance of having an identity, having a strong local identity, having a national identity, and having a European identity. And we have to kind of talk about how we build that. And one way, for example, that I will just throw in there in the end, is to, and this is very much a debate about immigration as well, to focus more on contributions and this is very much been the stress when people talk about national interest, which again I said before, we need to sort of, talk about how far does national interest extend. But nonetheless, if we want to build a sort of more European identity, it could be an idea to stress contribution more. So when we have movement across borders, how do we sort of contribute to the respective welfare states, for example? It could be something that you bring with you more. That's just an idea of how you can start building more identities in this sort of framework. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Erica Meyers, short closing comment.
I just want to say that I think next period for the European Parliament will probably not be business as usual, which in itself I think is a good thing. And because, there are a lot of people already talking about the post-political period where we are in, with technocratic and everybody more or less is being in the center. Well, I think that phase is more or less over. There are very important things at stake: political rights, security of people. So it can be maybe quite hard, but as somebody from a journalistic background, I must say I think it's quite interesting also, and it can bring politics more alive and more back to really the down-to-earth issues, which are very real. So I wish you all very good luck here in the Parliament.
Thank you very much. And now, Timo, if you'd like to conclude.
Okay, I have 3 points I want to wrap up the debate I've been gratefully exposed to. And I'm especially grateful to the gentleman and the lady from England because they affirmed some thoughts I had previously.
Scotland.
From Scotland, and nobody's perfect. So the first thing I want to say is a detailed remarks and methodology I will not comment on the time frame. Please read the study, and if you have any questions you can write me per email. The second thing is I strongly object the statement or the thought of understanding right populist parties as being something we or whoever should be afraid of. By no means. These parties speak the word of a substantial amount of the people. Though the mere fact that they win elections is a symbol of that democracy works. And this is nothing bad at all. And I want to encourage everybody at the table, if you wonder why these parties rise, or why people vote for them, skip reading The Guardian or Le Monde Diplomatique, or to ask your advisor who sits next to you and speak 5 languages. What you should do instead is go to your national municipality and ask the people, what concerns do you actually have in your daily life? And then when you figure out what concerns they have, not what your friends in Brussels, which concerns they have, but what concerns the people have in the tiny village in Bavaria or in Scotland, if you understood their concerns, try to speak a language everybody can understand, even though they haven't studied politics and speak 3 languages. And this is a message I think should be taken away from this roundtable, which at least to me has been really interesting, and I benefited a lot from this. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It was a pleasure for me being here.
To close the session formally, Felicita Medved, the President of the European Liberal Forum, 1 word.
Thank you very much. I would really like to thank all in the panel and all the participants who contribute to this really lively debate. And I think this has proven that European Liberal Forum is open to a lively debate across the political spectrum. And I couldn't agree more that the next mandate will be very interesting, and of course it will be not less but more politics, perhaps back to the real political arena. And what I think we also need is an initiative to give a solid meaning to European citizenship, if not identity, and as it was also pointed out many times, what are really the terms of populus, demos, and not least the nation. And it might be of interest for several of you here in the audience that European Liberal Forum will continue these debates, and there will be a book launch, which was already mentioned by Clara, on 5th of November here. The book is Anthology on European Populism and Winning Immigration Debate. And it will look into some other aspects of this European movement. Kenan Malik, the author of Fatwa and Jihad, has written the preface to this book, and he will also participate here. So I would like to thank you once again. I hope we will continue these discussions, and of course I invite you to the event that I have already mentioned, and also to other events which you can see on our website. So thank you very much.
Yes.